The morning of his wedding should have been untouchable, tie half nodded, in front of the mirror. His phone rings. Not his bride, not his mom. His boss's daughter, Claire Hale, the VP who smiles when she twists the knife. He answers, no congratulations. Unauthorized time off. Policy violation. You're done. She kills his job, insurance, and the corporate card paying for his venue and honeymoon. Then, with a laugh, consider it my wedding gift to you, freedom. He doesn't beg or scream, just says thank you, because what kind of loser gets fired on his wedding day and still walks away holding the thing that brings her whole empire down? If someone wrecked your wedding this way, would you crumble or plan their ruin? The morning opened with the kind of soft gray light that made the city outside. Ethan's hotel window look almost gentle, as if the streets and buildings understood that this day was not meant for harsh angles or loud colors. Steam from the shower still clung to the mirror, wrapping the small suite in a humid haze that carried the smell of soap, cologne, and the faint starch of a freshly pressed suit. Ethan stood in front of the mirror with his shirt half buttoned, trying to tame a stubborn fold in the collar while his best man, Marcus, wrestled with a bow tie on the couch. You keep staring at yourself. Like that, and Lena's going to think you married? The mirror instead, Marcus said, the words muffled by the fabric between his fingers, his tone joking yet threaded with the easy warmth of a friend who had been there since the days of cafeteria lunches and second-hand sneakers. Ethan smiled without fully looking away from his reflection. There was a slight tremble in his hands that he hoped came from excitement and not nerves, a fine shaking that made the small pearl buttons harder to fasten than they should have been. If this collar keeps fighting me, I might, he answered, his voice light, although his eyes carried the focused look of someone who knows that a single day is about to divide his life into before and after. On the desk near the window lay his phone, face down on a folded napkin to protect the polished surface from any stray drops of water. Next to it, a ring box sat open, the slim gold band catching the light whenever he moved past it. The invitations, the seating chart, the last-minute confirmations from the florist and the photographer, all of it had blurred into background noise in his mind, leaving only two clear points. The moment he would see Lena walking down the aisle, and the silent promise he had made to himself that nothing, not work, not money, not the company that had consumed so many of his nights would steal even a second from her today. A vibration on the desk broke through the calm, gentle at first and then insistent as the phone shifted a little on the napkin. Marcus glanced over, his hands finally conquering the bow tie. You want me to get that? Could be your mom again asking if you're sure about the flowers, he said, a grin pulling at his mouth because everyone knew. Ethan's mother had given more attention to the centerpieces than to her own shoes. Ethan crossed the room and picked up the phone, expecting another stream of questions or a message from Lena saying the makeup artist was late. On the screen, a name glowed in white letters against the dark background, Claire Hale. For a moment, he simply looked at it, the way someone might look at a storm cloud that suddenly appears on an otherwise clear sky. Claire, his boss's daughter, newly installed as vice president in the company that had become almost a second home to him, rarely called. When she wanted something, she sent sharp emails or summoned people to meetings that ran over schedule and left, everyone walking out a little quieter than when they had gone in. She's calling you today? Marcus asked, the joke in his voice fading, replaced by concern that slid in without permission. It can wait. Let it go to voicemail. Ethan thought the same, yet years of training and a lingering fear of disappointing. The Hales pushed his thumb to the accept button. He moved toward the window, putting a small distance between himself and Marcus, while the city filled the glass with a sweep of rooftops and distant cranes. Claire, he said, keeping his voice even, polite the way one spoke, to a superior who did not like to be reminded that they were roughly the same age. Today's I know exactly what today is, she cut in, her tone crisp and controlled, with the faintest trace of amusement layered over steel. The sound of office air conditioning whispered behind her words, along with the faint clicking of a keyboard. You have a few minutes to talk, Ethan? He glanced at the clock on the wall, saw the thin red second hand moving past the 12, steady and unhurried. I'm getting ready to leave for the ceremony, he replied, trying to keep any edge from his voice because arguing with Claire was like arguing with a locked door. You only ended up tired and bruised. Is something wrong with the shipment schedules? I left everything aligned for the next 2 weeks. That's the thing, she answered, a smile now audible in her words, though it did not sound warm. You left everything aligned for the next 2 weeks. And you did it after submitting a vacation request that was never approved. There was a pause in which he could almost see her, seated at her father's massive desk, nails tapping on the polished wood as she looked out over the city with that cool, calculating gaze she had worn the first day she toured the logistics floor. It seems you made the choice to stop being available to the company without proper authorization. I submitted the request 3 months ago, Ethan said, his heartbeat beginning to thud a little harder in his chest, as the familiar pressure of work-related conflict pushed against the fragile bubble of his wedding morning. Your father signed off on it himself. HR logged it. You can check the system. I already did, she replied, each word landing with a precise weight. The file shows the request was rescinded last week due to upcoming restructuring. You were notified. No, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady, while the hand holding the phone grew slick. I received nothing. No email, no call. Claire, your father promised this would not be a problem. I've put in 7 years without missing a single deadline. He told me to enjoy the time. My father says many things he does not follow through on, she answered with a light, dismissive laugh that did nothing to ease the knot forming at the base of his throat. This is not about loyalty or history, Ethan, this is about facts. And the fact is that you are unavailable, unapproved, and currently charging company time for personal affairs. He looked at his reflection in the window. The city layered over his face like a second skin. For a strange, stretched-out moment he saw 2 versions of himself. The man in the suit, hair just slightly damp, about to pledge his life to the woman he loved, and the other man in fluorescent office light, eyes tired from night after night in front of spreadsheets, holding the department together with his own 2 hands. Those 2 selves had always lived side by side until now. What are you saying? He asked, though a cold shape of understanding had already begun to form in his chest. I'm saying it's over, she replied, as if she were reading a line off a presentation slide. Effective immediately. Your employment with Hale Logistics is terminated due to policy violations and failure to comply with direct oversight. HR will send you the formal documentation within the hour. The room seemed to narrow around him, the sounds of Marcus moving in the background turning distant, like someone shuffling chairs in another building. Claire, you can't be serious, he said, each word pushing through air that felt thicker than before. Today is my wedding. We have agreements in place. The incentive card for the venue, the bonus for the honeymoon flights. Your father approved those as part of my retention package. If you cut me off now, that card was deactivated 10 minutes ago, she said. Not unkindly, not kindly, simply stating a fact. Accounting has already processed everything. Think of it as clean business practice. You have a tendency to make yourself indispensable. Ethan, that's admirable, yet also dangerous for a company that needs flexibility. Consider this a chance to start fresh. He closed his eyes for a moment, not to hide tears because none had come, but to press back the surge of anger that rose like heat from his stomach. You could have waited a day, he whispered. You could have called Monday. You chose this moment. There was a brief silence, during which he heard the soft creak of a leather chair. When she spoke again, her voice carried a calm satisfaction that made his fingers tighten around the phone. Of course I chose this moment, she said. You're getting married. You'll have your new life, your new priorities. Consider it my gift to you. Clean break. No more late nights, no more missed dinners. No more excuses about work getting in the way. You're free. The word free landed like a stone in his stomach. In the reflection on the glass, he saw Marcus approach, eyebrows drawn together, lips moving in a question that Ethan could not yet hear. Somewhere in the building, a housekeeping cart rattled down the hallway, the mundane sound clashing with the sudden emptiness that had opened inside him. Claire, he began, the name tasting different now, sharp at the edges, but the line clicked before he could shape another word. The call ended with a soft tone that felt final in a way no meeting or memo ever had. The phone screen returned to its calm, neutral glow, showing only the time and the thin bar of battery at the top. A small banner notification appeared. Quick and cold. Access revoked, Hale corporate email. Another followed almost instantly. Access revoked payroll portal. He stared at the messages as if staring hard enough might reverse them, but they stayed white letters on black, shouting in a quiet, merciless manner. Marcus's hand settled on his shoulder, firm and warm. "Ethan," he said gently now. "What happened? You look like someone just canceled the wedding." "They didn't cancel the wedding," Ethan replied slowly, the words feeling heavy on his tongue, "but they canceled everything else." He turned from the window, the city blurring behind him, and felt the day tilt, not ending, not yet ruined, but violently changed in a way he could not yet understand, as if someone had torn a page from the script of his life and replaced it with another that he had never agreed to read. For a moment after Ethan spoke, the room went strangely thin, like all the air had been pulled toward the narrow window. Marcus's hand stayed on his shoulder, fingers pressing through the fabric of his shirt as if to keep him from falling through the floor. "They fired you," Marcus said at last, the words slow, heavy, as if he did not quite believe his own voice. "On your wedding day." Ethan lowered himself into the chair by the desk. His knees felt unreliable, his chest tight, his thoughts moving too fast to catch. The phone lay between the ring box and the car keys, its black screen already calm, as if nothing inside it had just changed the shape of his life. "She said it was a gift," he answered, the bitter taste of the word still raw in his mouth. "Effective immediately. Access gone. Corporate card dead. All of it." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. "Tell me exactly what she said," he urged. "Not because I like pain, but because details matter." Ethan ran a hand over his face and told him. He spoke of Claire's clipped tone, of the way she had spoken about unauthorized time off like she was reading an item off a spreadsheet, of the laugh that had come when she called unemployment freedom. By the time he reached the end, Marcus's jaw had set into a hard line. "That woman," Marcus said, anger simmering just below the words, "has the heart of a calculator." He tried to smile, but it came out crooked. "She thinks she owns you." "Not anymore," Ethan said quietly. "Legally, at least." The reminder sparked a dull memory. He reached for the phone, opened his email, and saw the notice from HR confirming termination without cause. It was cold, official, and carried the line his lawyer friend had once insisted on. Acknowledgement that performance and conduct were not in question. "The reversion clause," Ethan murmured. Marcus looked up. "You mean that thing you insisted on when you built their system?" Ethan nodded. Years ago, when Richard Hale had asked him to create a custom logistics platform, Ethan had agreed only with a written condition. If the company ever ended his employment without cause, the full license to his work would revert to him. Back then, no one had objected. They had not imagined a day he would not be theirs. "They just handed my framework back to me," he said, feeling the idea settle like a stone in a riverbed. "They fired the only person who knows how to keep their roots alive and gave him all the keys on the way out." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Claire thinks she ruined you," he said. "She may have just unplugged her father's company." The thought was dangerous, almost intoxicating, but there was no time to follow it. They still had a wedding to reach. "We deal with work later," Marcus said, standing suddenly. "Lena's walking down an aisle today. You can start your revenge tour tomorrow." Ethan forced himself up. The collar that had annoyed him earlier now felt like a hand on his throat. Yet as he straightened it in the mirror, he saw more than panic in his own eyes. There was hurt, yes, and anger, but beneath them something more solid. A line of quiet resolve. 15 minutes later they were in the car, ribbons fluttering from the side mirrors, as the driver eased into late-morning traffic. Buildings slid past, bright and ordinary, as if they had no idea life was coming apart inside the back seat. Ethan's phone vibrated halfway across town. The name of the venue flashed on the screen. He answered, thinking it would be a final timing check. "Mr. Cole," the woman from the front desk said, polite but tense. "I'm calling about your payment authorization. The corporate card we have for your event was declined this morning when we ran the final charge." Cold crept up his spine. "That card is part of my employment package," he said. "The deposit cleared months ago." "Yes, we have the deposit," she replied, shuffling papers. "However, Hale Enterprises contacted us an hour ago. They canceled their sponsorship and instructed us to transfer all charges to your personal account on arrival. When we tried to run the card again, it declined. Unless the remaining balance is settled when you check in, We'll need to release the main hall to another client. She named the balance. The number seemed too large to fit in the car. Ethan stared at the windshield where sunlight flashed off passing buses. Please don't release the hall yet, he said. We're almost there. I'll find a solution. He ended the call. Marcus watched him closely. How bad, he asked. They pulled the venue card, Ethan answered. If I can't pay the difference, they give our hall away. Marcus swore under his breath and then went quiet, thinking. Ethan did not trust his own voice anymore, so he said nothing as the building came into view, all glass and pale stone, banners fluttering by the lake. Inside, the lobby buzzed with calm, organized movement. The front desk manager, Dana, stood waiting with a folder clutched to her chest. Her professional smile wavered when she saw Ethan's face. I'm so sorry to trouble you today, she began, lowering her voice. But the instructions from Hale were very clear. She turned the folder toward him. The contract page that once held the corporate card now carried a red void stamp. Underneath, a printed email from Hale Finance requested immediate cancellation of the special rate. We can move you to our smaller garden room at a reduced cost, she offered gently. Or if you can pay the remaining balance yourself, we'll keep the main hall. Ethan stared at the photo of the smaller room. It was pleasant, simple, not the space where he and Lena had imagined their first dance. His throat tightened. The lobby doors slid open with a soft sigh. Laughter spilled in along with the rustle of fabric. Ethan turned. Lena walked toward him in her protective robe, hair already done, eyes bright, until she saw his expression and the cluster of staff around him. The smile faded from her mouth but not from her eyes. There it froze, half joy, half fear. What happened? She asked, fingers wrapping around his arm. He looked at her and understood there was no kind way to hide it. The company canceled our venue arrangement, he said quietly. The card's dead. They want full payment now or they give the hall away. Her grip tightened. Why would they? She stopped, the rest of the question finishing itself as she searched his face. Ethan, work? He nodded once. Claire fired me this morning. No notice, no reason, that makes sense. She timed it so everything would collapse at once. For a heartbeat, Lena did not move. Then her jaw set, a tiny sharp motion. She did this on purpose, and she said, not asking. She wanted us to walk into ruins. Ethan waited for tears, for panic. Instead, Lena lifted her chin. Fine, she said. Then we won't play on her stage. Her eyes swept the lobby, taking in the chandeliers, the hall doors, the flowers stacked on carts. If this place will not have us without her money, she went on, voice steady, we will get married somewhere that will, but it will still be today. Lena's mother stood there, clutching her small silver purse like it might hold the answer, eyes moving from her daughter to Ethan to the red void stamp on the contract. Tell me this is a joke, she said, though her voice already knew it wasn't. They canceled the corporate sponsorship and the card, Ethan answered. Saying it aloud felt like biting down on stone. If we don't pay everything today, they take the hall and give it to someone else. Her mother's face fell. We don't have that kind of money lying around, she whispered. We can help, but... Ethan shook his head before she could finish. I'm not asking you or my parents to cover a promise my company broke. This is on them, not on our families. Lena, still holding his arm, drew in a slow breath. The white of her robe fluttered around her ankles. Her hair perfectly arranged, eyes shining not with tears but with a sharp, focused anger. So your boss's daughter fires you on our wedding day, she said, voice low. Then she cancels the venue she promised, and probably laughs about it in her glass office. That's the shape of it, Ethan replied. Lena looked at the archway leading into the main hall, where staff were still adjusting centerpieces, unaware that the room might not belong to them in an hour. She looked at the guests beginning to arrive at the doors, at her mother gripping her purse, at Ethan's stiff shoulders. Then she straightened. We are not begging anyone to let us use a room we already paid for, she said. If this building doesn't want us without her money, we will leave it behind. Her mother blinked. And go where? She asked. The church is too small for the reception. The park is booked. My cousin, Marcus cut in suddenly from behind them. He had been hovering just far enough away to pretend not to listen, phone in hand. Dina, big yard, big heart, more plastic chairs than any sane person needs. She was bragging online about her party tent last week. I bet the poles are still in her garage. Lena's eyes turned bright, quick, alive. A backyard wedding, she said slowly. String lights, borrowed tables, food carried over in cars. Ethan imagined it. The uneven grass, mismatched chairs, laughing neighbors leaning over the fence. It was nothing like the glossy brochures they had stared at months ago. Somehow in this moment it felt better. "We'll lose the deposit," Lena's mother warned. "All those extras." Dana, the manager, cleared her throat softly from behind the desk. "We do have to keep the deposit," she said, regret clear in her face. "But the food already prepared and the flowers technically belong to you. If you cancel the haul, I can authorize that we release everything at cost. You can take whatever you can carry." Gratitude washed through Ethan with surprising force. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to do that." "It's not right what they did," Dana replied. "I can't fix it, but I can at least not make it worse." Lena looked at Ethan. "What do you want?" she asked, soft but serious. He thought of the morning, of Claire's cool voice calling unemployment freedom, of his father's proud messages, of his mother's texts about the flowers. Then he looked at Lena herself, her small squared shoulders, the stubborn tilt of her chin. "I want to marry you today," he said. "If that happens in a mansion or a backyard, I don't care. But I want the place to feel like ours, not like another part of their control." "Backyard it is," Lena said, and something like relief flashed across her face, as if making a choice tore down a wall inside her. Everything moved quickly after that. Marcus called Dina, who answered on the first ring and said yes before he could even finish explaining. Lena's mother stepped into full battle mode, summoning uncles, cousins, and neighbors with the authority of a general. Bridesmaids rushed to catch guests as they came through the doors, redirecting them to cars with breathless excitement. Ethan's mother cried for exactly 10 seconds, then wiped her eyes and started issuing calm, precise orders about which boxes of decorations to take first. In the middle of the storm, Ethan slipped aside to the large window overlooking the lake. The water lay calm under the bright noon sun, pretending the world was simple. He opened his email. The HR notice confirmed termination without cause. The simple sentence unlocked the clause he had almost forgotten. Another automated message sat directly below it from the licensing server. "All rights to Cole Logistics Framework reverted to original owner." He stared. For 3 years, the company's trucks had moved according to his code. Now, with one careless firing, they had given it all back. Very quietly, so no one would hear, Ethan laughed once. It wasn't amused. It was a short, incredulous sound, like air escaping into a room where a window had just been opened. He drafted an email to every major client who used his system. He wrote in steady professional language, explaining that his employment had ended, that the software now belonged to him again, and that he would be forming an independent firm. If they wanted uninterrupted service, they could reach him directly. At the end, he added one careful line, "I apologize for the abrupt nature of this change. The timing of my departure was not my choice." Then he wrote to the board, attaching the termination letter, and the call recording he had automatically captured. He said little there, only that the manner of his exit might have significant operational impact. He saved both drafts, not sending them yet. He wanted one clean moment to exhale before he pulled that trigger. Behind him, Lena called his name. When he turned, she was framed by the open doors, sunlight outlining her hair, her robe fluttering like a small white flag that meant surrender to nothing. "Dina's ready," she said. "Let's go build our wedding." Ethan pocketed his phone. As they walked out together, leaving the glittering halls behind, he knew 2 things with unusual clarity. He was still getting married today, and his revenge had already begun, quiet and unstoppable. Like a tide rolling toward a shore no one in that glass tower was watching. Dina's house looked almost shy from the street-peeling paint. A crooked mailbox, a sagging porch. No one would guess the backyard. Behind it was about to hold an entire wedding built out of stubbornness and love. By the time Ethan and Lena arrived, the quiet residential lane had become a small festival. Cars lined both sides, doors open. People carrying chairs, flower boxes, catering trays. Children zigzagged through adults, too young to understand why everyone was moving so fast, but thrilled that no one was stopping them. The backyard was wide and a little wild. Grass flattened in some spots, thick in others. 2 big trees leaned toward each other over the center, branches forming an accidental arch. Someone, probably Marcus, had already strung a line of white Christmas lights from branch to branch, letting them dip low over where an aisle would be. Folding tables in 5 different styles ringed the space, half covered with borrowed sheets serving as tablecloths. "You people are mad," Dina shouted from the center of it all. Both hands on her hips, bandana bright against her dark hair. Her grin said she approved. "And I am obsessed. Get in here, bride and groom, we have a miracle to stage." The next hour blurred. Ethan carried crates of flowers through the narrow side gate while cousins arranged them in jars. Dina had been saving for something. The caterers, surprisingly calm, set up serving tables under a patch of shade and began transferring food from professional silver pans to whatever platters and dishes neighbors produced. Someone dragged out a wobbly wooden table and announced it would be the cake table. Someone else set up an old Bluetooth speaker and tested it with a love song that crackled but somehow sounded perfect. Lena moved through it like the center of a storm. Robe tied tight, hair already pinned, calling out instructions and thank yous with equal intensity. She laughed when the dog tried to run off with a bouquet, wiped a child's sticky hands before they touched her dress bag, and hugged Dina so hard the smaller woman squeaked. "Is this what you imagined?" Ethan asked her quietly at one point, as they stood side by side watching. His mother carefully placed name cards on mismatched plates. "No," Lena said honestly. Then she smiled, eyes soft. "It's better. Every person here chose to be with us, not with the chandelier." When the time came, Ethan slipped into a spare bedroom to put on his jacket. The mirror was old and mottled, but his reflection looked steadier than it had that morning. He straightened his bow tie, smoothed the lapel, and for a heartbeat let himself feel everything at once. The humiliation, the anger, the strange electric hum of possibility. His phone buzzed again. He checked it quickly, dozens of new emails, subject lines from clients and unknown board addresses stacking one over another. Not now, he told himself, not yet. Outside, the backyard hushed. The borrowed music started again, softer this time. Ethan stepped out to the makeshift altar under the tree branches, Marcus beside him trying not to look like he'd been crying. Then Lena appeared at the back door. Her dress, meant for a polished hall, glowed in the honest daylight. The train brushed the old wooden steps as she walked down, her father at her side, eyes wet but proud. The guests turned in their seats. And for a long moment, it did not matter that the chairs didn't match or that someone's laundry line hung just beyond the fence. The only thing that existed was the aisle between them. When she reached him, Ethan's throat closed for a second. Somehow he got the words out. The vows were not perfect. They wobbled and cracked and made people laugh. A plane roared overhead right as Lena said "for worse," and everyone paused to let the sound pass. When Ethan finally kissed her, a single firework shot up from the alley, one of Dina's neighbors, unable to resist, and exploded crookedly above the trees. It was messy and loud and absolutely theirs. The reception began with paper plates and plastic cups. People danced barefoot on the grass, shoes abandoned under tables. Children chased bubbles. An uncle tried to fix the speaker mid-song. Someone spilled punch and cleaned it with the speed of a guilty teenager. Ethan stayed in the glow as long as he could. But when the music switched and couples flooded the improvised dance floor, he slipped into the kitchen for water and a brief moment alone. The old tiles were cool under his shoes. He pulled out his phone. His inbox had become a different landscape. One email after another from major clients, some bluntly enraged on his behalf, some cautious but clear. "We prefer to continue working with you directly. We are suspending new contracts with Hale until we understand this change. Send us your company details as soon as they exist." Below them sat a thread from the board's short-clipped messages. "We need to talk. This recording is unacceptable. Call Richard." As if summoned by the words, his phone rang. Richard Hale flashed on the screen. Ethan let it buzz twice, then answered. "Hello?" "Ethan," Richard said, voice rougher than the smooth baritone he used in presentations. "I just left a board meeting that felt like a trial. They heard the recording. They saw the reversion notice. My daughter has done something very, very stupid." Ethan leaned against the counter, watching sunlight stripe the floor. "She fired me," he said, "on my wedding day. Then she killed the venue card. That's more than stupid." "I agree," Richard replied quietly. "I will not try to excuse it. The board is furious. Clients are already calling, some threatening to walk with you. We cannot afford to lose your framework. More than that, we cannot afford leadership that treats people this way." He paused, and Ethan heard the faint murmur of voices beyond the phone, the rustle of expensive suits in a glass room. I want to offer you something, Richard went on. Not your old job. A partnership. Ethan said nothing, so Richard continued. We spin your platform into a separate company, he explained. You at the head, majority owner. Hale takes a minority stake as investor and anchor client. You hire your own team. You run it your way. We channel our contracts through you instead of trying to rebuild from scratch. And Claire? Ethan asked. She will be removed from operational control on Monday, Richard said. The words heavy. That is already moving. I am still her father, but I am also responsible for thousands of employees. I cannot let her destroy what they built. Ethan let the offer hang in the air. On the other side of the thin wall, he heard Lena laugh clear and bright, followed by the sound of people clapping along to a song. He could almost see her, cheeks flushed, dress hem catching on the grass. I'm not sacrificing our honeymoon, he said at last. Even if it's just a cheap road trip now. I won't let your crisis swallow my life again. Take your honeymoon, Richard answered at once. We'll have papers drafted while you're gone. You read them when you're ready. No pressure. But I'd rather stand in front of the board with your yes than with your silence. Then send the draft, Ethan said. We'll talk when I get back. But understand any deal we make puts the company in my name, with protections in writing that no one can rewrite out of spite. No more handshakes. No more secret cancellations. Understood, Richard said. And Ethan, congratulations. On your wedding and on handling this with more grace than we deserved. They ended the call. The kitchen was quiet again, smelling of dish soap and spice. Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket. The choice wasn't final yet. But the power balance of his life had shifted so far he almost felt dizzy. He stepped back into the yard. Night had deepened a little. The string lights glowed soft and golden, catching in Lena's hair as she stood under them, searching the crowd for him. When she found him, her whole face changed relief, curiosity, love all at once. She held out her hand. How bad? She asked as he reached her. He slid an arm around her waist and drew her close as the next song began. Slow and easy. Bad for them, he said. Very, very good for us. Turns out your enemy just funded our future. They began to dance, moving carefully over the uneven ground. Around them, their families swayed, laughed, recorded shaky videos on their phones. Overhead, the sky stretched wide and dark. Nothing like the polished ceilings of the hall they had left behind. Somewhere across the city, in a tower of glass, emails continued to explode in inboxes. Meetings were called, panic quiet and sharp. But in a backyard lit by borrowed lights, the man who had walked away in silence that morning smiled into his wife's hair and, without bitterness, began to imagine exactly how far his unthinkable revenge could reach, simply by building something better and leaving the ruins behind.